Okay guys, new deck review. This one was sent in by Capion. It's called Eurocorps Armored, but it is not actually a Eurocorps Armored deck. It's a Eurocorps Standard, or a Eurocorps non-spec as we also call it. Capion, who sent it in, wants to know how would I build this deck, considering it's built towards 10v10s. He says, I have come to love fast armored pushes with my Eurocorps armored deck, but quite often I'm getting frustrated by Red 4 helicopters blocking my advance. Helo rushes I can deal with thanks to the Geppards, but I have nothing to snipe long range anti-tank choppers with, especially of course the KA-52 and the Akula teams. So I thought maybe an armored general deck, trading veterancy and some numbers for versatility in the form of the Grotal and the Hep, Tiger or Celtic teams. He's going to be using it in 3v3s, 4v4s, 10v10s, obviously stuff with open terrain. You do not want to bring this deck into One's End Harbor, for example. It's not going to perform well there. Says that the Razit is in here to find the damn helis in the first place if he's dealing with long-range helicopters, because some of those are quite stealthy. The tanks operate with meat shield. Leopard 2A5, 2A4, or Leopard 2A4, Leopard 2A4, Leopard 2 as the front and the killers of the Leclerc and the AMX-40 in the back. He wants to know if I think the idea of using a deck like this is viable. Definitely, it is. I think that it is decent to have a general deck. I think it's better to have a specialized deck in a 10v10 because you have enough teammates to back you up with different units should you need to. And of course it's nice to have support from a player on TeamSpeak, but that's not always a possibility. If you don't have that possibility, it's sometimes safer to go with a general deck, because you can create a sort of self-sustaining battle group. But if you don't mind relying on random strangers a bit, you can go for an armored deck. And that's gameplay that I'm going to be uploading tomorrow, which is an armored push that I did a while ago, which went very, very well. Anyway. If this deck is going to be a general deck, and that's the way I'm going to keep it, let's see how we can make sure that this deck is optimal for 10v10s. For starters, I think he has a good choice here with the Leopard 2A4. Or the Leopard 2. That's the one that I use in my deck as well. Stick with a FOB, you want to have that in there. Go with a command or a resupply helo, but don't go with Mankadi 6x6. You don't need those, and the maps are too big to really have those being effective. What I've found to be nice to use is the logistics, because they only carry 1,000 points of supplies, which may not seem like much, but it's usually all you need. And you have possibly separate sections of the map where you're operating. You can just send one of these, one of the 8 that you get for a card, instead of one of the 3. So that's another logistics unit that I would use here. As far as infantry goes, we are going to build this general deck as an armored push. So a Panzer Grenadier and a Marder 2 is definitely a sort of mandatory unit here. He has 8 of those. Don't go with the veteran, because a Marder 2 is such an effective unit that it's going to upvet itself quite quickly. And you may not say so from the sloping of this unit, but they have 10 frontal armor. These things can take a tank round and laugh. So don't underestimate the Marder 2 if you ever come up against it. As well as having the armor, it also has a very, very accurate gun, both on the move as well as sitting still. Sitting still, of course, it's even better. And 6 armor penetration means that this thing can actually punch through quite a bit of armor, as well as sides of tanks if it gets too close. The second group of Panzer Grenadier 90. I'm not sure that you need this much infantry, but in some areas of the map it can be very, very handy to have them. So I'm thinking Asgard, where you have sometimes a bit of towns in the way, or you want to have some Panzer Grenadiers hold the town as your Marder 1s go on to support a push. In which case, having Panzer Grenadiers there as either a holding force or as a pushing force is definitely useful. So I'm keeping those in. The Deckungsgruppe is something that I think you will not use at all. At least I will not use a type or this type of infantry in a 10v10. So for me, that one's out. The Mistral AMX-10P transport, good choice here. I think that in my deck, I'm not sure which one I used, but I do bring in quite a few of these. Probably all 6 at some stage, but you're going to see that tomorrow. Other infantry that might be useful is either another card of Mistrals, because if you have a lot of armored vehicles, then your biggest threat is helicopters and planes, as Capion already pinpointed. Another unit that we could bring, Fallschirmjäger, if you really want to clear out a town, but you don't get that many of them, especially if you go with 53G. If you go with a Fuchs or the Fuchs Milan, you're going to get a bit more of them. You can get 8 or 6 versus 6 or 4, which is a very, very low amount of units for 2 points. Other units that you can go with, we already have the Martyr 2 in there, so we don't really need that. And I don't think there's another way of getting more of those Martyr 2s. They're just heavily limited. You don't need ATGMs. You could go with Rimas. And something that I've seen someone do very effectively is go with reservists. This may go completely against all of your better judgment, but you can bring these guys in for 10 points, including transport. The VTTs can take fire so that your tanks don't have to. The reservists, again, can take fire, being used as a meat shield. They're terribly slow, but in significant numbers, they can either be used as a holding force so your Panzer Grenadiers can move up, or you can push these guys up through a smokescreen, which is also something that you will be seeing tomorrow. Support-wise, he has the Crotal, which is the main anti-helicopter long-range weapon. You will need this one. I would just go with 6 to make sure I have a bit more versatility in here. 3 Rolands is a bit low. I would go with 4. Yes, you're going to sacrifice some accuracy, but I find that these things are not very survivable if you're getting a lot of artillery fire. So going with 1 more may just be the difference between scoring the plane kill on, for example, the Su-25, which is threatening your tanks, or not. Artillery in the form of the M270 LRM. I'm not a big fan of artillery in 10v10. That may be a lack of mine, but I don't use it that much. Especially not something like that. This is very, very good artillery, don't get me wrong. But you may want to either get something that can snipe a single unit, if you need to, with the Caesar. Or you could go with the Mars, which has the cluster munitions. So this thing is going to be quite effective against larger concentrations of vehicles and tanks, and can be used quite effectively to snipe command vehicles. The LRM, not so much. This is more of an area stun weapon. So what I would use as a sort of all-rounder to deal with both hiding command vehicles as well as heavier targets, I'd go with the Mars. You can go with either 2 if you have the income to get 2 of them, or 1 if you like the better accuracy. So what I would go with personally is 2, because I'm going to bring in these things later in the game, usually if I bring them in at all. At which stage I usually have enough points to bring in 2 of these. Now then he has a couple of Gepard A1s, which can be dealing with helicopters, but for the long range you really only have the Crotals. You can go with another card of Crotals and sacrifice the Gepards, but I find that the Gepards are better at dealing with larger swarms of helicopters. See, the Crotal has only 4 missiles, and you can see them just being mounted there on the vehicle. The Gepard also has, or this version has the main twin GDF-001s. Those 35mm anti-air rounds are going to be very, very effective against larger groups, because they can switch between targets quickly, nail one helicopter, stun it, and possibly leave it for the Crotal to finish it off. Or, of course, the Roland, which also has good range. Then he has some mortar carriers, and this is one that I also use in, I believe, all of my Eurocorps decks, because it's just too good to pass up. Now in this deck you can get 2 super heavies, so that's what he went with. Leopard 2A5 and 2 Leclercs. I personally go with 3 Leclercs, because I think that these things are so good if you micromanage them correctly, that they will get that up veterancy to a hardened, possibly veteran, and maybe even elite on their own. Which also gives you 1 more super heavy. And getting 5 super heavies in one deck is quite significant. 3 Leopard 2A4s may be a bit light. Of course you do have 5 super heavies, but you're going to have to very micromanage these tanks, as well as the 2A5s and the Leclercs. And sometimes you just don't have the amount of time to do that. So, considering that we have all of these super heavies, those are going to be the main punching power. And I'm going to compare the Leopard 2A4 to the 2A1. The difference here is a bit of armor, 3 points, but this is still quite a survivable tank. 1 point of armor penetration. And for the rest, you're looking at exactly the same tank. So what I'm going to do is go with, let's see, 4 trained Leopard 2A4s or 4 hardened 2A1s. This is tough. This is tough. Let's go with 4 Leopard 2A4s. The reason I'm going with the 2A4s anyway is because they have more armor. And this may lead to even more micromanagement because they get damaged, you have to repair them and send them back out, which is going to take micromanagement time off of you. But at the same time, these things may actually survive, where a Leopard 2A1 may not survive. The other tank that he has in here is of course the Leopard 2, as well as the AMX-40. Now don't get these tanks confused, because they have a different mission profile. AMX-40 is extremely accurate at 65%, not so much while on the move. So don't get these things to attack on the move, because they are not that good at it. They also have significantly less armor than the Leopard, 3 points, and you will notice that. Because if a tank does, for example, say 21 to 22 points of armor penetration, it's going to one-shot your AMX-40, and it's going to take 2 shots to kill the Leopard 2. So with that in mind, the Leopard 2 here has a different mission profile. This one can perform as a sort of meat shield, whereas the AMX-40 can be a flanker or a tank that you put in an ambush position. So more of a defensive tank, really. As far as veterancy goes, he has 7 hardened of these, as well as 8 trained of these. You could go with hardened if you want to, but with 24 tanks, I think you have a bit of reserve tanks. Recce-wise, 3 furnace bears. We're going to switch that to 4. I think 4 veterans good enough. You don't really need them to be that much better. 2 Tiger helicopters. Nice spotting helicopters, these. Exceptional optics, good stealth, and this is rare on a helicopter. This is something that you barely see, if at all. They also got the Hot 2 for dealing with tanks. They got the Stingers for some limited A capacity. And you have the Snap rocket pods for general targeting purposes. The one thing that these things don't have is an autocannon. You can see it is just not there on the nose of this helo. Leopard 1A1s as recon tanks, definitely agree with these. I always take them in a deck that tends to do very aggressive pushing. I'm not sure I would take the Razit in this deck, because while they do have exceptional optics, your Tiger has the same thing, and the Razit is very fragile. Personally, I think that a cheaper reconnaissance vehicle would be a better option, such as the Lux, which is fast, has good optics and has an autocannon. Or another favorite of mine, and that's the one I'm going to put in here just because I think it's a really lovely tank. And I may be a bit biased because I played this thing to no end on World of Tanks. The AMX-1390. Cheap, fast, not great autonomy, but for a 10v10 it's usually enough. Very good rate of fire if it hits, and it may say 30%, but as you get closer to a target, and this thing can get close because it has medium stealth, you can get this accuracy up to 60, even 70%. So let's go with 8 of those. And then of course the VBL Mistral with a couple of Mistral missiles. As well as very good optics, very nice off-road speed of 95 and medium stealth. Good selection, you have passive spotters, but most of this is geared towards active spotting. So a unit that's going to be moving around or next to the front line, so it can spot stuff for the tanks and support units that we have. Now he has absolutely nothing in vehicles. I don't think that's a bad thing for this deck. You don't really need it. One unit that would be nice to have is the Marder VTS-1 or possibly the ERC-90. They have slightly different profiles. VTS-1 is a bit of a fire support vehicle. It has more armor, 4 points versus 1. It's slower, it has a bit more armor penetration, but 5% less accuracy. The Sergei is a flanker. Just pure and simple flanker. Low amount of armor, very fast, good autonomy, decent gun on it, 90 mil versus 105 mil. You're going to see that in armor penetration, but this thing will flank, so it's going to shoot stuff in the side, which will make it a lot easier for the tank to go through. Anyway, we don't have any excavation points left, and I'm not going to be able to free up anything anyway, so I'm just going to skip this category. As far as helicopters goes, he has the HAP, which has more of those Mistrals. And considering that his main problem was helicopters, I'm going to delete it. It may be counterintuitive, but I think we need more Celtics. The Celtics are very fast. They're 40 points cheaper than the helicopter that we just had, the HAP. It carries the same amount of Mistrals, but you can upvote these things slightly more. You can have these at hardened, which is going to give you 16% accuracy, and that's 16% of 60, not 16% flat on top of it, so it's not going to be 75 right away. But with a group of these, you can easily counter helo rushes and deal with any helicopters, because they're also quite fast, 310. You can dart these things out of your front lines, kill off the Mi-28 or the Ka-50 that's threatening your lines, and go back. And then finally the Tiger HAD. Good rocket pods, good Aut-2 missiles, and of course a very good autocannon. Very nice all-round helicopter, good for filling lines, closing up positions, and making sure that you have a fast and mobile anti-tank unit. As far as air goes, he only has 3 units, 1 Rafale, 1 Mirage 111C. I wouldn't use this one. Reason for that is that it has 0% ECM, which in a 10v10 where AA is usually all around, this makes it a 100 point throwaway unit, and that's usually not the way I play. I would go with a seaplane, and that's for 2 reasons. 1, a seaplane can be very effective at scoring points, because AA units usually start out as they're radar guided at 50 points and go all the way up to, I believe, 130. And you can clear airspace of AA units for other players to move up. So, for example, you have a buddy of yours sitting into a position or sitting in a position close to you, but he lost his seaplanes and he's using an airborne deck. It's going to make it extremely difficult for him to maneuver. If you can support him with a Tornado ECR, you can make it more easy for your own Rafale to operate, your own Super Etendar to kill tanks, as well as his helicopters and airplanes to do bombing runs. So for this deck, I think that the Tornado ECR is a better option. And then he doesn't have a naval section, so I'm going to skip over that. Now, with this deck, I think that it is well enough for a 10v10, but you could go with a full armored deck if you'd want to. And I'm not going to discuss a deck like that. I think I already have at some stage. Anyway, tomorrow I'm going to be uploading a bit of armored gameplay, and you can get the deck code from that deck for yourself. I'm not going to discuss it, but you can just use that deck if you want a pure Eurocorps armored deck. Anyway, with that, it's the end of this deck review. If you want to use this deck, which you can perfectly use in smaller games, it doesn't have to be 10v10, you can just go 2v2, 4v4, something like that. The deck code is in the description down below, so you can import it. Also links, as usual, to supporting my channel, sending me gameplays and replays, and leave a comment if you have any questions about this deck, any suggestions for improvement, or any of your own questions for me for example, the next video of the War Room that's going to be coming up Monday. Anyway, looking forward to your comments, looking forward to your replies, and I hope you liked it. If you did, hit like, and I'll see you next time.